How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the next lecture in which we're going to initialize our Stratix 5700 switch. As you can see, I currently have it sitting on my desk right now. So we're going to go through the manual first and foremost, understand what the procedure is, and then perform that procedure on the switch so that we can connect via our laptop, view the web UI, and ultimately understand what it takes to just get started with the switch in Express Start mode. So we have already looked through this manual and you should already have a copy, if not from our side, then from the Rockwell automation website. Again, double check that you are looking at the right documentation for your specific switch. If you're following some of these instructions, they will be similar, but slightly perhaps different based on the hardware and or the firmware of your specific switch, 1000 series or 5400, 5700. As we scroll through, we will obviously have a lot of overview of different features of the hardware and what's applicable to the different part numbers. We need to get down to the Express setup overview. And so here you will notice that when you first install the switch, use Express setup to perform these initial setup tasks. Assign the switch an initial IP address. You can then access the switch through the IP address. For more configuration, you can run the global macro to set initial configuration parameters as described on page 37. There's going to be a variety of different ways of accomplishing this. There's ways to load the software via the SD card. That being said, one of the first steps, as the manual suggests, is going to be the Express setup. And here we have the requirements. Once again, we'll talk about the firmware and what it takes to flash the firmware in a later or separate video, but you do want to pay attention because some of the configurations as well as the details are going to be a little bit different. You'll notice that here as well, there's a note of version 11.01.xx or later. It's going to be slightly different in your Studio 5000 environment. We will skip over this for the time being. What we do need to locate is the Express Setup button, and you will notice that it tells us use the Express Setup button on the physical switch to perform the Express Setup, as the name suggests, and you'll see that on different models, that button is going to be in different locations. We have the 5700 series switch on my desk right now, so we should be able to find the Express Setup button as indicated here. In order to perform the setup, let's just really quickly review. So there's going to be 3 different modes that we can achieve through the Express Setup button, and that's going to be a short press, a medium press, or a long press. So it is also important to pay attention as to what you are doing as you're configuring some of this hardware, and you'll notice that they're going to have different outcomes. So in short press mode, you're going to press and hold the button until the setup status indicator flashes green during seconds 1 through 5, and then we need to release the button. In the medium press, it's going to be flashes red during seconds 6 through 10, and then we release. And in the long press, it's going to be seconds 16 to 20, and then we release after seeing the same indicators flash green and red alternating. And you'll notice that there's going to be other descriptions. So between 11 and 15 and after 21, the setup status indicator turns off. If you release while the indicator is off, no Express Setup mode is enabled. It is a little bit confusing. I will be completely honest with you. For those who are doing this for the first time on actual OT hardware, once again, make sure that you're doing this with something you are comfortable with that is not part of production, because it will basically erase the current settings on a switch that may potentially be running equipment. And so under the short press mode, which is what we're going to do, you will notice that the short Express Setup Management interface is selected. The switch acts as a DHCP server on VLAN 1000 with an address of 169.254.0.1. This is very important. Once the DHCP session is successfully established, the switch assigns the computer an IP address of 169.254.0.2 on VLAN 1000, and default login credentials are set to the following: username, no username, and password switch. This is wrong for some reason for my switch. We'll talk about this in a moment. But basically, the express setup parameters are completed via device manager. And so what we need to be aware of, in addition to these requirements, are some of the conditions that are described here. A non-default configuration exists on the switch. So the switch status indicator turns red for 10 seconds. You do not connect to the express setup port within 2 minutes from when the port status indicator flashes green. The unconnected port status is going to turn off. No DHCP request is received in 2 minutes from when you connect to the express port. The setup status indicator turns red for 10 seconds. No browser session is started for 2 minutes after an address is assigned to the computer. So a couple of things we need to take care of, and I'm here to basically help you understand what needs to take place. So the first thing that we need to check is, of course, I'm still using the USB to Ethernet dongle. And if we go into the network and sharing center into adapter settings, we need to make sure that the dongle is given a DHCP access. And so if you remember in a different video, I had set a static IP address. In this case, we want to make sure it is an obtain an IP address automatically, as well as obtain DNS server address automatically. And that is already configured. So I'm going to press on OK, and that check has been completed. So here we have these steps. So we apply power to the switch. When the switch powers on, it begins its power sequence. Power on sequence can take as many as 90 seconds to complete. Make sure that the power on sequence has completed by verifying that the EIP mod and setup status indicators flash green. If it fails, the EIP mod status indicator turns red. If you do not press the express setup button within 5 minutes after the power on sequence is complete, the setup status indicator turns off. However, you can still run express setup after the setup status indicator turns off. Press and hold the key for 1 to 5 seconds. We've seen that above. The switch should be ready for express setup. Connect a category 5 Ethernet cable from the switch port that flashes to the Ethernet port on a computer. So in this case, we're going to go through the steps. Let's switch over to the table view for just a moment so we can discuss this really briefly. So as you can see here, we have the button in this top portion of the switch. What I will be using is a old clip that I had to open the SIM slot of a phone, but you can use a paper clip, you can use a piece of wire, whatever is able to fit inside of this hole. And so ultimately you will hear and feel this very satisfying click when you push that button in. It is a recessed small push button on a circuit board inside, nothing extremely fancy. But what's important to pay attention to is the lights. We only have a couple of seconds before we release. So we are expecting the lights to flash green, but we're also, after we release, are expecting the first port, since it is available, to start flashing green so that we could connect our adapter on the Ethernet side into the port and assign a DHCP address. So once again, it's just a standard jack that we have here. Let's go through the procedure. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to release, and as you can see, just as expected, we have the first port flashing. So I can plug in my cable and then switch back to the laptop so we can resume configuration. And you will immediately see that the port started flashing a lot quicker because it is now getting traffic. So continuing on with the documentation, you will see that once you connect the switch to the computer, the following occurs. The status indicator for the port that is connected to the computer changes from a green flash to a steady green, which is pretty much what we're seeing. The switch acts as a DHCP server on VLAN 1000 with an address of 169.254.0.1. So what we can do at this point is I can Control-C, Control-V into my browser, press on Enter, and you will notice that I have the login. And so in this case, I'm going to type in admin and switch. I'm going to press on Enter, and you will notice that we will be given access to the device manager of the switch. It will take just a moment to load. Usually it can be faster than that, but we will see the very typical Rockwell automation interface, and I'm just going to resize my browser so you can see a little bit better. We can see the switch information. You will notice that I had a name which is assigned to Solus PLC switch. We have an IP address which is 192.168.1.70 that I had set on that switch a while ago. We also have the firmware revision right here. That's going to be 15.2.1 EY1. We have a few more data points, right? So port utilization, we have errors, we have receive, we have transmit. It is something that we will talk about in a separate conversation. We have the temperature of the switch. Again, if you're looking to diagnose some of the problems with your devices, you can obviously take a look at the configuration. You can select the different ports that are either being used or not used. You can configure different settings of your switch, but ultimately what we needed to access and demonstrate here is that now we have an IP address temporarily of 169.254.0.1. We can access the settings of the switch and we can configure it into a variety of different modes, from the smart ports to the port settings. If you have the more advanced features, you will have the NAT or network address translation, you will have the VLAN assignments, but there's going to be a lot of different tools within this interface we can utilize without going and downloading RS links, without using Studio 5000, without even using the Cisco iOS to program this switch.